Hi and welcome. My name is Rocky Heron, and in today's class we're going to be looking at a transition that is often taught and practiced in vinyasa classes. I've heard over the years that it can be a transition that's somewhat elusive or even controversial for folks because it can be difficult to map intelligently and skillfully. So we'll be looking at the movement from Virabhadrasana 3 to Ardha Chandrasana, Warrior 3 to Half Moon, and vice versa, which ultimately will require us to not only balance on one leg while we map a skillful transition from hip abduction to adduction, and also will require good, strong activation in our outer hip. So we're going to experience this in a couple different planes: supine, standing, crawling, etc. And hopefully it'll be an illuminating and beneficial experience for you guys. So we're going to use 2 blocks and a strap. You can start on your back. Everything that we'll do in today's class will be progressive. So if we move into an area where you don't feel so stable or it doesn't feel quite agreeable with where you're at, you can always just regress to the previous drill and receive good benefit from all the work today. So bring your legs together, straighten through your legs, press your legs down into the floor, and then keep your left leg as it is, draw your right knee into your chest. Pull your right knee towards your chest. Press your left leg into the floor, and then keep your right leg where it is, but release your hands. Okay, so just for a moment, strengthen your hip flexors, pull your knee towards you. The tendency is for your left leg to want to bend here, so keep pressing your left thigh down. And then take hold of your right shin, and we'll abduct your right hip. So that's the movement of your hip out to the side. Now keep your hip abducted, and we'll add some outer rotation. So you're going to swivel your heel a bit more towards the ceiling. And keep your right knee drawing out to the side, up towards your shoulder, and release your leg. Now we'll range our hip through this movement. Okay, so keeping your leg rotated out, your foot turned out, kick through your heel, straighten your leg forward, then turn your toes back up, draw your knee back into your chest, open your hip to the side, abduct, kick your heel up towards the ceiling, so wrap your hip externally and then kick forward through your heel. Again, draw your knee in, abduct, rotate externally, kick through your heel. Now let's go in the opposite direction. So bend your knee out to the side, then adduct, bring your knee in, and kick straight forward. One more time this way. Externally rotate, turn your foot out, bend at your hip, bend at your knee, draw your knee up, then adduct, draw your leg in, and straighten your leg and set it down. Okay. Press your right heel into the floor, draw your left knee into your chest. So this movement is called flexion of your left hip. You're going to draw your left hip into deeper flexion, so knee towards chest. Using your hands to assist the movement. Now keep your leg in this position and release your hands. So now the muscles will have to kick in a bit more to support and sustain the shape. And then use your hand, assist your hip out into abduction. And then add in the outer rotation. So when your femur rotates externally, your left heel will lift up towards the ceiling. Keep your leg where it is, release with your hand. The weight of your leg moving to the side might kind of tip you to the side, so turn your belly more to the right. Then kick forward through your heel. Turn your toes up. Draw your knee in towards your chest, flex, abduct, wrap externally, kick through your heel. One more time in that direction. Then go in the opposite direction. Externally rotate, so your foot turns out. Abduct out to the side, flex your hip, then adduct, and straighten. So I'm going to keep using these terms, but I'll define them just so there's a familiarity with what it is we're actually going for in these positions. Okay, release your left leg down to the floor. Now take one of your blocks and place it out to the right. I'm going to place my block on the middle setting. You may or may not need to go higher or lower. Flex at your right hip, so draw your right knee into your chest. Then abduct out to the side, and this time take your right knee onto the block. So with your knee on the block, now you have something to press into. Lift your right heel up a little higher than your knee. Press your knee into the block, and if you need to lift it up higher, you can totally do so. So as you press your knee into the block, you're going to get a little more activation and engagement in your right outer hip. Bring your arms out to the side. Now keep your right knee pressing into the block, and I want you to turn your pelvis to the right. So you'll turn your left leg in, your left hip will come off the floor. Then press your knee into the block and roll your left hip back down to the floor. So move back and forth in this direction, this way. And consider, as you turn your pelvis to the right, you're actually decreasing the abduction of your hip. As you roll your pelvis back down, you increase the abduction. So in the first exercise, we're creating the movement by moving our leg. In this exercise, we're creating the movement by moving the rest of our body, pelvis and spine. And come back onto your back, draw your right knee up, and straighten your right leg out onto the floor. Take the block over to the left, flex at your left hip, abduct to the side, take your left knee onto the block. Now wrap your heel up towards the ceiling, press your knee down into the block, and then turn your pelvis to the left. Press your knee down and wrap your pelvis back to the floor. Okay, so as you turn, your inner thighs move closer together. It's kind of like a lunge pose or a warrior one. As you wrap out, go more into like the warrior two shape. Okay, so we do this often in our practice standing up. We'll do it later. So just an interesting way to experience the movement under a different sort of context, different relationship to gravitational forces, the weight of your body. And then roll onto your back, draw your right knee up, and straighten your right leg onto the floor. Take hold of your strap. We're going to try this same pattern, this time with your leg straight. Bring your right knee into your chest. Place the strap around your right foot. Hold on to either end of the strap, and straighten your leg up towards the ceiling. So for a moment, hold onto the strap with your left hand, both ends. Take your right thumb into your right hip crease and create a little outward rotation of your right hip. So it's going to wrap your outer right thigh, outer right hip forward. And for me, that turns my right toes out just a little. I can feel when I do that the back of my pelvis ends up more level on the floor. So the two halves of my pelvis are a bit more evenly weighted on the sticky mat. Then again, hold on to the strap, one end in both hands, in each hand rather. Press the ball of your foot into the strap. Tighten the muscles around your right knee so your thigh is engaged. If you are able, you can draw your hip in a little closer, draw your foot in a little closer. And breathe in. Let's take a hamstring stretch. Breathing out, curl up. Deepen the stretch through the back of your right leg. And bring your head back down to the floor. Hold on to the strap in your right hand. Take the block, one of your blocks again, over to the right. And open your right hip out to the side. So same movement, just with a longer leg. Okay, so when the knee is bent, we call that a shorter lever. When the leg is straight, we lengthen the lever. Okay. Longer lever means not only might there be more tensile forces acting on the leg, like the state of your hamstrings, etc., inner thighs, but your leg literally becomes heavier to support. So I have my right shin on the block. To create more outer rotation, I'm going to scoot my right heel a bit more towards the ceiling. Now you can keep hold of the strap. Some of you might be able to actually hold your foot. And then press your shin down into the block. Okay. Pull your tailbone forward. Okay. Recruit those muscles in the back of your pelvis. And we're going to take these little hip movements again. So you'll turn your pelvis to the right, press down into the block, and then keep that as you wrap your pelvis and left hip back down to the floor. Okay. Again, turn your pelvis, and then open your pelvis. So it's not so much that I'm turning my left thigh in, It's more so that I'm turning my whole pelvis to the right. So if anything, I'm actually adducting and abducting my right hip as I change the orientation of my pelvis relative to my leg. Next time you bring your sacrum back to the floor, pause. And then lift your right leg back up towards the ceiling. Take the strap off of your foot and slowly lower your leg back down. Take the block over to the left. Lift your left leg, place the strap around the ball of your left foot, straighten your left leg. Hold on with your right hand for a moment. Use your left thumb, wrap your outer left hip forward. So that slight external rotation will create a more balanced state in your pelvis so that the left pelvic bone is not sort of hiked up onto your waist. Okay. You can curl yourself up, stretch a little further, a little deeper. Push into the strap with your foot. And then bring your head down. Hold on to the strap with your left hand, turn your leg out, open it out to the side, and aim your shin for the block. Now, if you hit the block and you say, oh, I have more space, more room to go, you could lower the block. Alternatively, you could lift the block up higher. Now, press down into the block. As I push into the block, I'm looking for some recruitment, some engagement on my outer left buttock. Okay, so you can feel that kind of tone that happens as you translate the force into the block. And then keep that as you turn your pelvis to the left. So when I turn to the left, those muscles will lengthen, but they can stay engaged. As I wrap my pelvis back to the floor, those muscles will shorten. And usually when muscles shorten, it's more accessible for us to feel them recruiting. Sometimes there's the misconception that lengthening muscle tissue means getting it to relax. Okay, really the skill of our transitions into and out of not just yoga poses, but many of the movements of our daily life require us to keep our muscles both strong and long. One more time. Turn your right pelvic bone to the left. Press your shin into the block and wrap back onto the floor. Good. Lift your left leg back up. Take the strap off of your foot and slowly lower your left leg down. So I'm going to play with that movement now. Instead of taking our leg to the side, we're going to move our whole body essentially. We'll keep our leg in one position. So draw your right knee up into your chest. You can hold onto your knee for a moment, hug it in. And then take your arms out to the side. Lift your right foot slightly so your right shin is parallel to the ceiling. And create a slight external rotation. So your right heel will move to the left and your right knee will move to the right. Now your objective is to keep your right shin where it is. Okay. You're going to take your right arm and thread it over towards your left arm. As you do, turn over onto your left side. You can lift your head up, roll onto your outer left hip, but keep your right shin where it is. Pause for a moment, take your right hand outside of your knee like you did with the block and press your knee and your hand into each other. So here we are in that same position we were in on our backs. Now moving back and forth between these positions, keep your shin where it is and roll onto your back. Let's try that a few more times. Roll over onto your left side. Keep your right leg where it is. I feel here as I push my left foot into the floor, the outer part of my left hip is engaging. And roll onto your back. Last couple times, you might try straightening your right leg. Keep your right foot where it is, and again, roll onto your left side. And roll into your back. Good. And then lower your right leg down. All right, second side, draw your left knee in. Hold onto your shin. Create a slight outer rotation, so turn your thigh out, heel in. Take your arms out to the side. Try and keep your left knee where it is. Thread your left arm over to the right, lift your head. roll to the outer edge of your right hip. Okay, so as you roll, now your hips will be abducted, left hip out to the side. Okay, and then roll onto your back slow. Again, thread over, roll to the right, roll onto your back. You might try with a straight or even just straighter leg. Okay, roll over to the right, push up through your foot, try to keep your foot right where it is. Roll onto your back. And one more time. We won't do it today, but it could be a fun challenge to put something on top of your foot, like a book or an iPhone or a block, even a blanket, and see if you can balance and stabilize. Okay. Lower your left leg down to meet your right. Then take your hands underneath your back and press yourself up to a seated position. All right, we're going to try these movements now, exploring them on our hands and our knees from a quadruped position. Okay, so come forward. Position your hands underneath your shoulders. Have your blocks nearby. In fact, take one of your blocks and place it on your sacrum. Now, this is going to provide a bit of a challenge here to see if you can articulate movement in your hips without moving your pelvis. So push down through your hands, lift your navel, lengthen through your spine. And then take your right knee, rather your right foot, and lift it up towards your right hip. Okay, so your right knee will bend deeper. Then lift your right knee up off the floor. Try and keep the block balanced, so keep the block from moving, and take your right knee out to the right. And you probably won't get your knee to lift as high as you might want to, right? Because a lot of times that lift comes from movement of the hip, movement of the pelvis. Okay. Then internally rotate your right hip. So you're going to take your right knee back behind you, okay, and then draw your right knee back in. Okay. Pretty small movement. You're painting a bit of a circle. Take your right knee to the right, take your right knee back, and draw your right knee forward. Try the other direction. Take your right knee back, keep the block level, open your right knee to the right, wrap it around. One more time. Knee back, knee out, knee around, and put your shin down. Second side, pull your left heel towards your left hip, lift your left knee slightly. Okay. So block is on the back of your pelvis, not so much your lower back. Take your left knee out to the left. Lift as high as you can without tipping the block to the side. And then, like you're painting a circle, take your knee back behind you. Draw your knee in, to the side, back, down, then reverse that. Take your left knee back, out to the side, wrap around, and again, knee back, to the side, and down. All right, take the block now, bring it out in front of you, and place it on the tall setting underneath your right hand, so you'll be asymmetrical in your hands. Now we're going to try that same movement. This time we'll allow our pelvis to move, which will open up the hip of the leg that stays on the floor. Will make sense. So bend your right knee, and again, take your right knee out to the right. Imagine you had that block on your sacrum. Lift your right knee as high as you can without dropping that imaginary block. Now to get your right knee to lift higher, your left hip actually has to abduct. So push your left knee to the left, fire up those outer hip muscles, and then squeeze your outer left hip in to turn your pelvis to the right. Okay. So now that imaginary block would for sure have dropped. Okay. Squeeze your left hip in. Now kick straight back through your right heel. Here we are in that similar position we were on our back, on our side. Now keep your left hip engaged, but slowly turn your pelvis towards the floor. So you'll be lengthening your outer left hip, and then draw your right knee back in. Take your knee out to the side, keep your pelvis level, then turn your pelvis to the right, squeeze your outer left hip in, kick back through your heel, and then turn your right toes down. Okay, draw your right knee in. Let's try the opposite direction. Kick back through your heel. Okay, now your left outer hip squeezes in to turn your pelvis to the right. Bend your right knee, draw it forward, and turn your pelvis back down towards the floor. Draw your right knee in. One more time. Kick back through your heel. Squeeze your left hip in to turn your pelvis open to the right. Bend your right knee. Turn your pelvis back down towards the floor. Balance that imaginary block and bring your right knee down. Second side. Place your right hand down, place your left hand on the block. Okay. Pull your left heel towards your left hip. Squeeze your right hip in. Take your left knee out to the left. So pause with your sacrum level. See how high your left hip can lift. Okay. Now turn your pelvis to the left. So now you're widening your right hip to lift up higher. Kick back through your heel. Now narrow your right hip. Turn your pelvis down towards the floor. And rebend your left knee. Okay. Open to the side. Hug your right hip in, turn your pelvis to the left, kick back through your heel, and then turn your pelvis towards the floor. Draw your knee in for a moment, reverse directions, kick back heel. Okay. To turn your pelvis, again, we're not stacking your left hip. If anything, we're pulling your right hip under, which turns your pelvis to the left. Then bend your knee. Turn your pelvis towards the floor. Draw your knee in once more. Kick back heel. Squeeze right hip in, so open your right hip. Pull your left knee forward. Turn your pelvis towards the floor and put your left knee down. So if that was all you did today, that would be quite potent, right? Just warming up our hips like this, creating more discernment and intelligence around the muscles that mobilize our legs in this way is good, strong work. Let's keep going. Okay, moving to downward facing dog, because there's always more, right? So use down dog just to stretch your hips a bit, back of your legs. So incidentally, we do this quite a lot in the vinyasa practice when we take three-legged dog. Let's try it. You can place a block under your right hand, which will make it a little bit easier. I have the block here on the middle height. Bring your feet closer towards each other and lift your right heel up towards the ceiling behind you. Now bend your left knee and pull your left hip over to the right. Pull your left hip underneath you to turn your pelvis to the right. So when we do this move, it feels like it's our right leg turning out. Really, it's our left leg that turns out, okay, relative to the direction of our pelvis. You can bend your right knee, pull your right heel towards your tailbone, pull your tailbone in, and turn your left knee, kind of point your left knee more to the left. Then re-straighten your right leg, turn your pelvis towards the floor, and put your right foot down. Okay, so with or without the block under your left hand, lift your left leg up. Bend your right knee a little, point your right knee more to the right, and squeeze your right hip over to the left, and that'll start to turn your pelvis open to the left. And bend your left knee. So my knees here are moving away from each other. My right hip wraps in, tailbone in, and then re-straighten your leg, turn your pelvis towards the floor, and set your left foot down. Okay, walk your hands back to your feet. Enjoy Uttanasana for a moment. Okay, and then take your hands up onto your knees. Press into your knees and lift your chest up. Okay, so come into this sort of standing cow pose. Take your tailbone back, lift your chest. Okay, just for contrast, do the opposite. Pull your tailbone under, stretch your lower back. And then again, take your tailbone back. Slide your hands down to your outer knees and press your knees and your hands into each other. And you'll feel that familiar firing of your outer hips. And see if you can keep that engaged. Keep your pelvis tipped back slightly, chest forward. Bring your hands to the front of your shins. And we'll do some simulated deadlifts here to engage the backs of your legs. As you breathe in, slide down just a little bit. And then push into your heels. Push your feet apart. Breathing out, slide up and stand all the way up. Again, take your hips back, bend your knees, push your feet apart as you slide down, and pushing into your heels, press out and slide up. If you do this successfully, you'll feel some stuff waking up on the back of your legs and your outer hips. Now you might try it a few times with your legs a bit more straight. Take your hips back so the weight goes more into your heels. Push your legs apart, push through your heels. And we're just hip hinging. One more time. We do this a lot in our practice. Looks like Ardha Uttanasana to Tadasana. At the gym, you might do this with weights, right? So an unweighted deadlift is a good way to train for that progression. Okay, step towards the front of your mat. And let's try these movements in some familiar poses. We'll work on Warrior 1 and Warrior 2. Take a big step back with your left foot, come into a lunge. And then bring your right hand to your outer right knee. In fact, make a fist with your right hand and press your knee into that fist. Again, there's your outer hip. Take your left hand to your left hip. Now, it doesn't have to be a really big lunge, okay? But I am interested in your right knee pointing in the direction of your middle toes. Not so much to keep your knee safe, but just to keep your leg consistent and congruent with the force that you're transferring from your hip through your knee to your foot. Maintain that, squeeze your right hip in, and as you pull your right hip over to the left, let that turn your pelvis to the left, and your left heel can spin down. Keep your leg as it is, and then push your knee into your fist and turn your pelvis back forward. Okay? So as I turn, open and closed, same movement that we did on our back, okay, but now my right foot is planted and fixed, and I'm moving the rest of my body around my right hip. And part of the reason why these transitions can be a little bit dicey or a little controversial is because we tend to orient them from our back leg wrapping without, or maybe taking for granted, the stability and the movement that needs to happen with support in the right hip. Okay, turn your left hip forward, lean forward, push into your right heel, and step up. Okay, step your right leg back. Make a fist with your left hand. You can even turn your left toes out a little bit. Press your left knee and your fist into each other. Take your right hand to your right hip. So I'm not interested in you taking the biggest lunge possible. Just exploring this hip movement with our feet more, what's called closed chain, or transferring force into the floor. So squeeze your left hip in. Feel your buttocks recruit, and as you squeeze in, it's going to turn your pelvis open to the right. Keep pushing fist to knee, turn your pelvis forward. So I'm lifting onto the ball of my back foot and then spinning my heel down. So in the vinyasa practice, we go often Warrior 1 to Warrior 2. This is essentially what we're doing. Okay, so putting a magnifying glass on that movement, it's becoming more discerning about what's actually happening here, can give us greater clarity in the flow practice when we only have a breath to organize it. Okay, turn your pelvis forward, keep your left outer hip strong, lean forward, push through your heel, and stand up. Okay, turn to face the long edge of your mat and take your 2 blocks, place them on the tall setting, on the long edge of your mat, furthest away from me. Okay, so if you're facing your camera, facing your computer, have the blocks behind you. So we're going to practice those deadlifts now in the side plane, moving into an out of triangle pose. So take a wide stance with your legs, separate your feet, bring your arms out to the side, and position your feet more or less underneath your hands. Okay, you don't have to be super, super wide, but this would be a good starting point. Turn your left foot in slightly and turn your right foot out 90 degrees. Okay. And for today, let's line up your right heel with the inner arch of your left foot. Bend your right knee slightly, which can give you some good information as to the direction, or the relationship between your femur and your shin. For me and for a lot of folks, the right knee tends to point more towards the big toe. Make a fist again, and press your right knee out into your fist, much like you did for the last pose, so that your knee tracks more with your middle toes. And translate that force up into your outer right hip. Okay. Now keep this line congruent, push into the ball of your right foot, and pull up with your right knee, pull up the outer seam of your right thigh up into your outer hip, so your right leg is strong. Now take your right hand onto your right thigh, place your left hand on your left hip, And we're going to do a couple side body deadlifts. So you'll lean to the side, slide your right hand down your shin. Okay. Pause when you get a red light. Now what's going to pull you back up is a push through your right foot, a squeeze of your right hamstrings, and you slide yourself back to where you started. Okay, so inhale, slide down a bit. Your left outer hip will also lengthen. And exhale, slide up. In fact, you can take your hand to your outer thigh and slide down the outer seam of your leg, and then push and slide back up. Okay, it's not too, let's say, uncommon to come into triangle pose by doing this interesting little hip tilting movement, which is not a terrible idea, but sometimes there's a missed opportunity here to engage and support more of the muscles that we are asking to lengthen. Next time that you come all the way down, pause. Take your right hand onto the block that's behind your shin. Okay, push the block into the floor to lift your chest up. And then create the action as if you were going to lift the block off the floor. So you don't actually have to lift it, but kind of pull up on the block and turn your belly towards the ceiling. We're not going to stay here long. This will be the entry point into the next pose, Ardha Chandrasana. So toe heel your left foot closer to your right foot. And then bend your right knee out past your right toes. For a moment, take the block to your outer knee and press the knee and block together. Okay, so feel that those outer hip muscles engage again. Pull your right hip underneath you, so press your pelvis towards the left edge of your mat. Then take the block to the floor out past your right toes. Keep that action, knee to the right, pelvis into the left, then push down and lift your left leg up. And really pay attention to what happens in your right hip. You might fall. Right, so the right hip likes to turn in, which could look like your right foot turning in. It could also look like your butt sticking out. Okay. It might look like your right knee wobbling into the left, or even more weight going to the inner edge of your right foot. So be discerning here. Ardha Chandra is a complex pose, to say the least. Keep squeezing your right hip in. Lift your left hip up. Same position that we were in on our hands and knees, now just with a longer lever. So the right leg is straight as opposed to the shin being on the floor. Okay. Now rebend your right knee. We're going to come out a little differently. Okay, move your left foot down towards your right foot. Shift your weight into your right foot. Lift the block off the floor. Stand up and set your left foot down. Turn your right toes in and then reset. Do the second side. Take a wide stance. Turn your right foot in slightly and your left foot out. Line up heel with arch. Bend your left knee a bit. Widen your left knee, make a fist, and press your knee and fist into each other. Okay. Zipper from your outer knee to your outer hip, like you could pull a string or pull a line of energy from outer knee to outer hip. Then push into the ball of your foot, pull up on your kneecap, firm and straighten through your leg. Right hand to right hip, left hand to your outer left thigh. Slide down a bit towards your shin. Then push to come back up. Slide down a little further. Push to come up. Twice more. So left foot pushes down and forward to come up. Next time that you slide down, you can bring your left hand to the block. Pull your tailbone forward. Turn your left thigh out. Again, we're not going to stay here very long. Shorten the stance. Toe heel your right foot in. Bend your left knee. Pick up the block and press the block into your outer left knee. So I'm squeezing my knee and block together. As I do that, just for contrast, you can take your butt and stick it out, see what that feels like. Nothing wrong with this, but it's not quite what we're going for. Then squeeze your left hip under and lean your chest back. So this is where you want to maintain for Ardha Chandrasana. Take the block in front of you, push down and lift your right leg. Okay, so again, if I was to kind of compensate here, my pelvis would swing back. Okay, so instead, you can always keep your left knee a little bent. Widen your left knee. It's as if I'm trying to twist my left foot almost like counterclockwise into the mat. Pull your left sitting bone underneath you. Right. So it's that strong action on your outer left hip that keeps your pelvis turned to the right. Now bend your left knee, start to lower your right foot, get your weight strong into your right leg, pick up the block, and then push down to stand up. Okay. All right, take your blocks down and find your way over to, let's use the wall for this next drill. Okay, we're gonna set up Warrior 3. So be about an arm's distance away from the wall. It doesn't really matter how far because you're just gonna use the wall for support. Bring your feet about hips width apart. We're gonna set up with that slightly bent kneed deadlift. Okay? So take your hips back, bend your knees a bit, slide down, bring your hands to your outer knees. Okay? Take your hands to your outer knees, press, stabilize your hips, and then keep that as you bring your fingertips or your palms to the wall. So keep hugging your outer hips in. Okay? You're gonna lift from here, your left foot up off the floor, and bend your left knee. Now, if at any point you need to restabilize, you can bring your right hand to your right outer knee, press, and squeeze your hips in to the left. Compensation here is for your pelvis to swing over to the right. Now, with your hands on the wall, pull down with your hands to lift your belly, then kick your left heel back, straighten through your left leg, squeeze the back of your left hip, and then draw your left knee back in. Press back, and draw in. Press back, and draw in. 2 more, push, squeeze, draw in, push, squeeze, draw in. Last time, kick your left heel back, squeeze your right hip in. Now draw your left knee in, keep your left foot off the floor, pull down with your hands, push down with your right heel, stand up, take your hands off the wall, and set your left foot down. Second side, slide down, press your knees out into your hands. Okay. Stabilize, take your hands to the wall, pick your right foot up off the floor. So recheck in, left hand to left outer knee, hug your pelvis into the right. One of the reasons your pelvis likes to swing to the left is to bring your left foot underneath your center of gravity. So it's understandable why that would happen. Okay. But if we can recruit more strength here, we can have more sort of control, more option as to where balance comes from. Pull down with your hands, kick your right heel back, and draw your right knee in. Kick back, and draw in. Kick back, draw in, kick back, and draw in. One more time, kick your right heel back, squeeze your left hip in, draw your knee in, then pull down with your hands, push down with your left heel, stand up, and set your right foot down. Okay, we're gonna try one more drill, and then we'll put all these movements together and see if we can navigate our way through standing balance transitions. So this next drill, you're gonna stand on your right leg and lift your left knee up. Then hold on to your left knee with your hands. So the objective here is not to open your left hip. In fact, we wanna keep your torso and your left leg oriented together. Put a little bend in your right knee. Now, imagine you could push your right knee out into something. You're going to keep your right knee where it is and turn your pelvis over to the left. Okay, then re-straighten your right leg. Then turn your pelvis forward, and then turn over to the left. If you needed more balance, you could go to the wall, put one hand on the wall. So I'm creating really external rotation of my right hip, my standing hip, by turning my pelvis, right, relative to my leg. So as I turn to the left, my right outer hip squeezes, and then my knee comes back in. Let's try one more. And then set your left foot down. Okay, if you're feeling lots of activity in your outer hips, it's to be expected, right? Well done. Second side, lift your right knee up. So hold on to your knee, your shin with one or both hands. Again, I'm not opening my right knee. I'm going to be opening my left hip by turning my pelvis to the right. So squeeze your left sitting bone in, and then come forward. Pelvis to the right, and draw in. So as if I had a block on my outer left knee, I'm going to push out into that block as I turn my pelvis, chest, knee to the right. Again, turn and draw in One more time, turn out and draw back in. And set your right foot down. Okay, I'm going to put these movements together. We only have really the time to attempt this a couple times through. I'm going to show it to you with blocks. If the blocks feel like still a little elusive, too challenging, you can use the wall instead. You could even use the back of a chair or even a dowel. Okay, so work within the reality that's most conducive to where you're at, and you can always go back and do it on your hands and knees as well. Okay, so you're going to take the two blocks and place them at the front of your mat. Stand behind the blocks. We're going to go first from Ardha Chandrasana into Warrior 3, and then we'll go from Warrior 3 into Ardha Chandrasana. We'll modify with the blocks, of course. Okay. So stand down on your right leg and lift your left knee up. Okay. Now keep your left knee lifted. Now this time you're going to open your left knee out to the left, put a bend in your right knee, and now turn your pelvis out to the left. You could slide your hand down to your outer knee and press out a little bit, so it's like we did on our hands and knees, widen your knees. Okay. Then do that little reverse deadlift, slide down your leg and find the block with your right hand. Okay. Once you're stable, squeeze your right hip in, straighten through your back leg. Turn your belly up, possibly lift your arm up, work your right leg a little straighter. Now to turn my pelvis towards the floor, I'm not turning my left hip in, I'm just lengthening my outer right hip. As my outer right hip muscles get longer, my pelvis turns towards the floor, then both hands can go to the blocks. Here we are in that same position that we were at the wall. Little bend in your right knee, kick your left heel back and up. You can test it. Right hand to outer knee, squeeze, right hip in. Okay. Then possibly lift both hands, bring your hands to prayer. Okay. To come up, it's a reverse deadlift. Draw your left knee in towards your chest. Push through your right heel, stand up, and set your left foot down. Okay, second side. Lift your right knee up, bend your left knee a bit, open your right knee out to the side. Okay. Widen your knees, so left knee stays widening towards the pinky toe. Okay. Then slide down your left leg, find the block with your left hand. Squeeze your left hip in, like we did on hands and knees. Okay. Kick back through your right heel. Straighten through your left leg if you can. Keep hugging your left hip underneath you. Ardha Chandrasana. Now slowly bring your right hand down towards the block. As you do, modulate a release, or a lengthening, I should say, of your outer left hip to find the block. Put a little bend in your left knee. Take your left hand to your outer left knee and press. Wrap your left hip in, just like you did at the wall. Then draw your right knee in. Okay, you can take both hands to your legs and slide up as you stand up. Set your right foot down. Okay, let's try it in reverse. So we'll go Warrior 3 to Ardha Chandra, a little trickier. Have your feet pretty close together. I'm going to start with that movement into Vira 3. So bend your knees, slide your hands down to your outer knees, stabilize. Then take your left foot, lift it up, squeeze your right hip in. Okay. You can keep your hands at prayer as you kick your left heel back, or you can bring your hands to the blocks, whatever feels more stable for you. Now to turn your pelvis into Ardha Chandra, dig into your right heel, okay. Twist your right foot clockwise into the mat, hug your right hip in. Again, you can use hand to outer knee to find that squeeze of the hip. Okay. Then take your right hand back to the block and peel your left arm up. To come out, bend your left knee, bring it out to the side. And then push down through your right heel, bend your right knee, stand up. Turn your pelvis forward and set your left foot down. Right, home stretch, second side. Let's see, where do we start here? Lean forward. Okay, take your hands to your outer knees, squeeze your outer hips, lift your right foot off the floor. Kick your right heel back, stretch and lift through your right hamstrings. Hands can go to prayer, you can keep them on your knee. Place them on the block. Now for Ardha Chandra, bring your left hand to the block. Okay, keep pressing your left knee to the left hip squeezes in. As you pull your left hip under, let that turn your pelvis up. Lift the weight of your right leg up, right? So part of the reason this transition can be a little tricky is because if your right leg is not being supported and lifted, it becomes sort of dead weight hanging on your hip. So give your hip some space. Now to come up, bend your right knee towards your chest, bend your left knee, widen your knees apart, hug your outer hips in, push through your left heel, come up, take your right knee forward, and set it down. Okay, so once through each side, of course this is a transition that we often do quicker in the vinyasa practice. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of understanding of what it is you're going for, and it's always a good idea to slow things down until you can get a handle on them before you speed them up. Let's do a brief hip stretch here. We'll do a balancing hip stretch. So with your legs about hips width apart, lift your right knee up, then externally rotate your right hip, take your right ankle onto your left knee, press your ankle into your knee, push your knee up into your ankle as you take your hips back, and your hands can go to the blocks. Pull both sides of your pelvis back, your chest forward. You could lower the blocks. And then press ankle down, push foot down, stand up, lift your right shin up, set your right foot down. Okay. Lift your left knee, turn your hip out. Place your left ankle on your right knee. Take your hips back, push your knee and ankle together. Take your chest forward. Find the blocks. And then press down to come up. Lower your left leg down. Okay. So if this is what your practice looks like today, thank you for joining me and enjoy the rest of your day. If you have more things you want to work on, your hips are certainly warm, stable, and alert, awake for whatever happens next for you. So I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Namaste.